Hi. So today we're going to do differential diagnosis and nutritional support for patients with apparent thyroid issues. And this is a very important topic since a lot of patients are tired. And we are also have on the website a patient focused why am I tired? And so that should be up in a couple of days. So we'll have that for you as well. And so the first thing is what we're going to talk about is what is the prevalence of thyroid disease and review our hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, talk about what diagnostic testing should be done, and then we're going to talk about food and supplements that can be used. As we are aware, the thyroid gland is your largest purely endocrine gland, their anterior aspect of your neck. And right now, it says that 12% of the US population will develop thyroid conditions in their lifetime. And currently, 20 million Americans have some form of thyroid disease. And up to 60% of people with thyroid disease don't even know they have thyroid disease because they've not had it correctly diagnosed. And I think we can really help with this. I think when we really start to explain to patients, and it's also on the patient education, one of these is really letting patients understand that multiple things are happening here, that we have to have the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the thyroid all working in concert, and that it is in your brain that you're having the hypothalamus, which does so many things for you in your brain, but for the thyroid, it is responding to cold. Now, normal body temperature, when we had COVID, we knew that normal body temperature, we said like 98.6 or 37 centigrade, but truthfully, the range is slightly wider than that. But when we say cold, we mean below body temperature. So at 96 degrees, you're going to have the hypothalamus make thyrotropin releasing hormone. It's going to then be released into the blood, go to the thyrotropes in the pituitary, which are then going to make thyroid stimulating hormone, which is then going to go in the blood to the thyroid, to the follicular cells, and tell them to make 97% T4 or thyroxine and only 3% of the active hormone triiodothyronine. We need tyrosine, an amino acid, we need iodine, and we need selenium. Those are the three ingredients that I have to have in order for the thyroid to actually make those two hormones, T4 and T3. The beauty is that we now actually understand the entire mechanism. We know that when the hypothalamus is making TRH going to the pituitary and making TSH, TSH is going to be the one that tells the thyroid to make T4. And again, this is at 97%. So the largest thyroid hormone made in the body is in the thyroid in response to TSH. And this is why a lot of medical doctors only look at TSH and T4, and that's all they care about. But it turns out that T4 has way more impact on TSH than it has on TRH. T3 has much more impact on TRH. And why is that? That's because T3 is the active hormone. In 2008, Dr. Callahan and I were doing a literature review, and a rat study came out. They took the thyroid right here out of rats. They gave radioactive T4, and they found out that T4 to T3 is a bile-dependent deiodinase enzyme in the liver. That study did not come out in humans till 2023, last summer. So in August of last summer, that paper came out finally saying that that is happening in humans. And intriguingly, what happened is that I've been treating people like we're rats since 2008, and we are like rats. That active thyroid hormone then is actually going to increase the number and size of mitochondria, which is going to increase your BMR. But where are those target tissues? The number one thing that has the most mitochondria per unit of tissue is the heart. And this is why if you get hyperthyroidism, you get tachycardia. The next largest is in your brain. But by weight, because we have so much skeletal muscle, we have just so many mitochondria in the muscle. And so this is why it's so important. We're going to see to do exercise so that you can actually have more muscle mass, so then you can make more mitochondria in the muscle. And of course, in order to burn fat, you have to have mitochondria, and you just make a lot more energy when you burn fat. And in order to have good bone health, again, we need that. So I think explaining to your patients how important it is that we measure all of these things and not just TSH. Now, one of the things and one of the reasons that people who are fatigued or feel they have thyroid issues and they're so cold and tired is that we have to burn fat in the mitochondria. And in order to burn fat, because a lot of patients with hypothyroidism gain body fat, and that's because they don't have enough mitochondria. We need all our B vitamins, 1, 2, 3 energy, B5, 6, 9, 12 methylators, which makes more mitochondria. We need iron and sulfur in order to run the electron transport chain. We need potassium to have good intracellular health, and we need magnesium to make any ATP. And we are going to make our body weight in ATP every day. But intriguingly, we also need carnitine. And so all the fat that we make in our body, not that we eat, if we eat shorter chain fats, things like coconut oil and shorter, but most fats that people eat and all the fat that people make cannot get in the mitochondria without carnitine. And so here's the fatty acid, it needs to drive its car into the mitochondria because it's too fat to walk in, right? And so what is the deal then? Even though we're talking about the thyroid, I wanted to throw in this thing about carnitine. And the reason I wanted to talk about carnitine when I'm talking about the thyroid is that both the thyroid hormone is going to be made into active hormone, but also carnitine, its last step, is made in the liver as well. So good liver health, really, really important. Intriguingly, in the cells of your body where you make trimethylglycine, it's going to have to then go through both kidney and liver in order to be ultimately converted to carnitine. Those steps require a thing called acetyldenyl methionine, which is a methylation step. And we had a whole talk about methylation and how important it is to have 6, 9, 12, the methylators. But 80% of adult Americans are magnesium deficient. So if I'm magnesium deficient, I'm going to have a lot of trouble burning my fat. And I need magnesium to make energy. So this is why we have to really differentially diagnose it. Is it that they're having trouble with their thyroid hormone? Are they having trouble with their liver? Are they having trouble with carnitine? Where are we having a problem? Now, I had a few patients, didn't matter what I did, I could not seem to get them to be able to burn their fat. I checked their thyroid, I checked their magnesium. It turned out that they couldn't make carnitine. Now, it's not a lot of people. Only 1 in 20,000 individuals, maybe even as few as 1 in 70,000, has a thing called systemic primary carnitine deficiency, where they just cannot make it. But they think it may be higher than originally anticipated. And I think it's because we haven't been running people's DNA. I'm going to be working with Dr. Callahan. We're going to try to figure out a way, because I have some anecdotal evidence that we can diagnose this without doing the big gene analysis where we had like 23andMe and things like that, because it looks like when I can't get my fatty acids in using this carnitine palmitoyltransferase enzyme, because we don't have carnitine, those apparently, at least in my clinical experience, are patients who, when they get on the treadmill and they're trying to get their heart rate in their target heart zone, it just doesn't work out. They're really struggling to keep their heart rate in the target zone. And I then put those patients on carnitine for a month, and sure enough, all of a sudden they can burn their body fat. Then you can take them back off, see if they have a problem again, and that would be a much less expensive way to really diagnose that they have carnitine. Carnitine naturally occurs in red meat, and you don't want to overcook it, but a lot of people have vilified red meat or just don't eat that much of it, and I think we're just seeing that a lot of the patients with carnitine deficiencies don't eat carnitine in their diet. So how are they presenting then? They are cold and tired because in the absence of adequate HPT axis, I cannot make energy and I cannot make heat. That is what the purpose of the thyroid is. And so we have to really follow the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and what everyone says. And again, trying to get Western clinical doctors to always agree with me and you and your patients, a little bit tough, but we really have to insist that they run the complete thyroid panel, that they look at TSH and T4, but also total T3, the anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and the anti-thyroid globulin antibodies. When I have antibodies against either TPO, which needs selenium to put the iodine on the tyrosine, or they make antibodies against thyroglobulin, which is a bunch of tyrosines and looks very similar to gluten, then that is the diagnosis of Hashimoto's way on the rise. So we're going to talk about Hashimoto's first. It's very, very important when patients present with hypothyroid type symptoms that we look at everything. If their TSH is high and their antibodies are high and their T4 is low and their T3 is low or low normal, that is the diagnosis of Hashimoto's. Because they have an autoimmune disease where they are literally attacking their thyroid gland, which is getting inflamed, then what's going to happen is that they're going to have to be medicated. I'm not against them being medicated. I think giving them Synthroid or levothyroid or Ormothyroid is really the right thing to do. It takes a village. And in order to get the antibodies down, what I have seen in clinical practice is it takes 6 months to a year doing the right support for anti-inflammatory herbs and no gluten, no cow dairy, and increasing their protein intake. So the right protein intake is minimum 1.2 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight. Now, the reason the gluten has to be taken out is gluten looks a lot like thyroglobulin. And when I'm having a sensitivity that I have, because the gluten content of wheat has gone way up, now I'm going to make an antibody in my intestines. But instead of having celiacs, that antibody, instead of being in the intestines and shearing off those microvilli, those antibodies now are going to the thyroid and they're causing all of these anti-thyroid antibodies and all of this inflammation, and the thyroid can get enlarged. Intriguingly, because the muscle has the most mitochondria per unit of tissue, these people are going to have a lot of muscle pain. And why, again, in order to have more protein and make more muscle and do some weight bearing exercise, going to be really, really important to have that 1.2 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight. And women in particular are going to have trouble with their menstruation because it's going to really mess that up. The thyroid has a lot of supervisory role over the gonadotropin releasing hormone. Because it's inflammatory and I'm making an antibody, we really need some good anti-inflammatory herbs. Now, what's interesting about cow dairy is in order to keep the lines clean, they use an iodine solution. And so cow dairy is one of the highest things in iodine. Anything that comes from a cow, and you can have quite a bit of iodine if you do, cow's milk and you're doing yogurt and you're doing cheese, there can be a lot in there. But when they remove gluten and cow dairy, then they're at risk for iodine deficiency because they were having plenty in their diet. So you don't want to have too much iodine. That's not good because you're going to drive the whole system, because you're not making T4. You're going to really up ramp what's called your iodine pump. You don't want that. But what you do want is the right amount. So kind of keeping that iodine not too high. Having some iodized salt, good. But some people also having, say, Himalayan salt or sea salt that's not iodized. It is absolutely essential. what we want them to do to see if they are iodine deficient is take their forearm, paint a 2 by 2 inch square, put betadine, which is that iodine containing compound that's brown. If it goes away within 24 hours, it's a sign of iodine deficiency. Now, we don't want to have too much though. So if it stays around a long time, then your iodine is too high. What happens though if my TSH is high, my T4 is low, my T3 is low or low normal, but my antibodies are normal? These people do not need to be gluten-free. And I said on the patient video, I think that the reason gluten has become a problem is not truly just the gluten, but because non-organic wheat has Roundup in it or glyphosate. I think that's really been very detrimental. And the foods that are very high in glyphosate are wheat, corn, oats, soy. So we want to be very, very cautious. So even though it's not on here, I'm not a big fan for anybody with a thyroid issue doing much soy. In Eastern medicine, it's considered too cooling. So what are we going to do? For the patient without the antibodies, I would say you're going to be really well off looking at their protein. I think the majority of these women who are the most likely to have hypothyroidism, there are plenty of men, but in the Merck manual, they'll say 1 out of 8 women can look like she has either primary hypothyroidism or secondary hypothyroidism, some kind of problem where they have the fatigue, the dry, itchy skin, they're cold, they have some paresthesias because without the mitochondria, you can't run your nerves. They're going to have some problem with their throat. They're going to be constipated. They're losing their hair. They're gain weight at their midsection. They feel they can't concentrate. They're going to have dysmenorrhea and they're going to be puffy. They could even have carpal tunnel. They could have some alopecia. They're very dry and coarse skin. All of those things are because of the mitochondria. And I think when we give people the right supplements and the right food, then their skin is going to be so much better. That's a sign their mitochondria are doing better and therefore that their thyroid is doing better. So we do need to add, I would say, food sources of iodine, like iodized salt or seaweed, or kelp or nori, or some dairy if they don't have Hashimoto, seafood, and one Brazil nut is the RDA for selenium. Selenium is missing in the soil today, so we want to have low dose selenium, and other nuts have it as well, but Brazil nuts are particularly high. And so again, don't want to do too much iodine, but we want to have the right amount, not too much selenium, but the right amount and enough protein. So tyrosine, which is not an essential amino acid in all good quality protein at 1.2 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. But this way, then they can easily figure out what they have. Now, this is the newest thing since 2008, but now known for sure in humans since 2023. TSH and T4 are normal. The doctor is like, your thyroid's fine. Go away, right? But the problem is their T3 is low. That's a functional hypothyroidism. Because T3 is the active form and T4 is not, you need to have enough T3. And it needs bile to flow. But you cannot have bile flow unless you eat fat at every meal. And a lot of Western clinical medical providers will be saying, cut out the fat. That's not the answer here. So we have to have fat, not a massive amount, but some fat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, every single meal, you have to have fat. So what I wanted to put in here so that you could also share again with your patients is to really explain to them this whole nice anatomy lesson where we see that the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreatic duct for the enzymes, they're all entering into the duodenum here through the sphincter of Oddi. And unless I eat fat, the sphincter of Oddi doesn't open. If the sphincter of Oddi doesn't open, then I don't allow any pancreatic enzymes that break down carbohydrates. They break down protein as well as breaking down fat. Now I can't digest my food and I have all this indigestion. And now people are going to have things start to come up and they're going to think they have GERD or whatever because they're just not, the food's not going down. That's a sort of Eastern clinical way of looking at it where they'll say they have a spleen stomach imbalance. The food's not going down and the food is coming up, and our immune system is not regulated correctly up, it's going down. And so now we're getting sick or we're having an autoimmune disease. That's not so great. So we want to kind of correct that. Additionally, when I have fat here, we make a hormone called cholecystokinin, and so that squeezes the gallbladder. So I have the right amount of bile, which is like detergent. It's going to break up the grease. And I also make a hormone in the duodenum when I eat fat called hepatocrinin, and that's what lets the bile flow. That's why it's so important to have that. Now, we are going to make bile, we're going to see in a minute, from cholesterol, and we lose 1 gram of cholesterol every single day in the bile, provided that we eat it with fiber. When the fat, the bile, the fiber, when we get fiber and bile together, we will then excrete it in the feces. When we don't, we will reabsorb 98% of it. When it gets reabsorbed, what's going to happen is it's going to go back through and get reconcentrated. And in my opinion, that is what's causing gallbladder disease, because now I have this sludgy, reused bile. I don't want that. I want to make fresh bile every day. The flowing of the bile is going to make more active thyroid hormone. This is why critical fat plus fiber. So when we say like a high fat, low carb diet, we want low refined carbohydrates, but plenty of fiber. The thing that also supports bile flow is betaine, that is in beets, but choline, which is in phosphatidylcholine or lecithin, becomes betaine. So beet root especially is great, but even beet leaves are good. They're all going to help support the flow of bile. And I can't make bile from cholesterol without vitamin C. It's a vitamin C dependent enzyme. And so this is why we want to have enough fruits in our diet so that we can have enough vitamin C to help us make bile. Guinea pigs, since 1982, they are the other thing besides primates that cannot make vitamin C from sugar. It is shown that they get cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, because they are not getting rid of their cholesterol in their bile. So here are these patients, we're seeing them, they look like they have some gallbladder disease, they look like that this is why their cholesterol is elevated in hypothyroidism, in my opinion, because we're not doing good conversion of T4 to T3. This is why they're constipated, because we're not getting a good flow of bile, which is like soap. It's going to help everything just ease out of there and have that go through. So we really want those things in there as well. So what about the patients who are on cholesterol lowering medication? Those patients might actually need some bile salts in their colon. Bile can still flow theoretically when you eat fat, but the problem is I need cholesterol to make bile. So it's this kind of catch-22. Over 40, 1 out of every 4 or 5 adults in this country is on a cholesterol lowering medication. So in my opinion, not that surprising that we're seeing them start to gain weight. We know that people on statin drugs ultimately end up getting diabetes because we don't convert the sugar to the right amount of cholesterol, because now we're just having this problem because we can't make cholesterol. So now that sugar is just going to go up in the blood and we're going to have elevated blood sugar, even though our cholesterol may be going down, but our triglycerides might be going up. So this is a huge problem and really has to be dealt with by diet and lifestyle. Additionally, we really got to have that vitamin C. Eat the citrus fruits, everything that has a yellow color, that's called quercetin. And that's how you know ascorbic acid's going to be there, because quercetin is one of the most important bioflavonoids that keeps vitamin C in that reduced form of the ascorbic acid. Peppers, great for this. Gala apples, great. Yukon Gold potatoes, I didn't put down sweet potatoes, really good. Celery, all very good sources of vitamin C. So just for women, 5 cups of fruits and vegetables in a day, and for men, 9. So I think a lot of people, if you count your fiber grams, that's really going to help you know that you had the vitamin C, that you have the fiber. And if you have it with fat, that's why a little oil on the potatoes or butter on the potatoes or roast those peppers. Now all of a sudden I can really have a really great bile flow, really great T3, and I'm moving my bowels, not on this presentation, but that will up your serotonin. So then you're going to feel a lot calmer. So what do we need to do to support each of these sections of the pathway? So for our brain, we really want to have protein. So we could have fish, any kind of animal protein like meat, and then really get our patients to get that if they're vegetarian, they're not supposed to be a carbohydrate addict. They're supposed to eat a complete protein by having like the rice and beans or the, where we have it together. And again, we could do some protein shakes to get that protein high enough. For the thyroid, we need that tyrosine. That is a protein. So again, we have to have the right amount. We need the iodine, which is really high in fish. It's high in seaweed. It's high in dairy. And we need the selenium, which is high in Brazil nuts. So all those things really going to support the thyroid. If I overdo it, I'm going to get a bit of tachycardia. You got to back up. So we'll talk about that in a second. So what happened is I had a patient who was on Synthroid, and when we actually got her to eat enough protein, when we had her doing her 1 Brazil nut a day, when we had her actually add a little bit of beetroot, the problem is she got tachycardia because she now started to convert her T4 to T3. Then we had to write a letter to the doctor, had to cut back on her T4. She got to go on a lower dose. She felt so much better because they had been, moving up the dose all the time, but now it was so much better. And besides, beets radishes are also really great for bile flow. So adding those good fruits, adding hot water with lemon, and if necessary, just add beets. And so I'm a big fan of making a nice beet salad where you put the beets in there, maybe put some goat cheese in, which will not have as much iodine as cow dairy. And so in a good olive oil with vinaigrette dressing, and or maybe lemon in there as well instead of vinegar. Really delicious. And maybe put some nuts in there. That's just going to really, really help that conversion of T4 to T3. Have beets for dinner tonight myself because I knew I was doing this. So here's a nice picture of all the good proteins that you can have. And we see the fish and the chicken and the beef, and then, all, the beans, and even broccoli happens to be one of the highest protein containing vegetables. And we have that there, but it's not going to be enough by itself. This video that you could click on or watch on the YouTube and on the website, it's a video about 30% of men and 50% of women over 50 do not get enough protein. It is critically up to us to tell people the importance of protein, not just for muscle mass, but for thyroid function. But if I don't have enough muscle mass and my thyroid is working, where am I going to put all those mitochondria I want to make? There'll be a negative feedback loop. So it's critical, critical, critical to build your muscle mass. And so this is why I ended up putting in 24 grams. I got to put this back here, this 24 grams of organic pea protein. The reason I wanted to do that was it's really hard for me to have 3 really high protein meals a day. I don't want to do 3 animal protein meals a day because of the way that animals are these days. And so because it's vegan, because it's hypoallergenic, because it's organic, it's very high in fiber. So now I get, and it also has good fat. So I kind of ticked all the boxes there, as well as the vitamins and minerals. This is a great slide I found recently to really show patients about the importance of the carb fiber ratio. When you show them, I take the total carbs, I divide by fiber, and I get the carb to fiber ratio. If it's greater than 10, this is all basically sugar. So that's why white bread is not so great, right? Italian bread tastes great, but not so great for you. When we look at whole wheat bread, A lot of whole wheat bread only has 2 grams per slice these days. And so it's certainly in the limit, but it's not going to be as satisfying as, say, a sprouted grain bread. So we want to have something, and we want to start really looking at that. When we're looking at any fruit or vegetable, on average, every fruit and vegetable is 4 grams of protein. And so they're going to always have a great ratio. So that's why fruits and vegetables do work out for you. And here are the requirements: is 25 grams a day for women and 38 for men. I do count my fiber grams every day. I notice that when I count my fiber grams, I'm getting enough carbs, because carbs are the major source of energy for your mitochondria, for your nervous system. And so you're going to focus better, you're going to feel better. And at rest, your muscles burning 50% glucose. And so you really need a lot of carbs. I really try to aim for 45% of my calories as carbohydrates. I notice when I eat less than that, I feel really exhausted. And if you don't have enough calories, you're going to feel exhausted, because you need fuel. That's just really important. And I think carbohydrates have gotten a bit vilified, but if we're going to make more mitochondria from our thyroid, we're going to have enough calories. If you drop your calories, your body thinks you're starving, it will drop your BMR. And so showing patients on the label for the shake, you can see here it's only 15 total grams of carbs, 4 grams of fiber. And so there we have this really great ratio. And the reason that I did put in some sugar is that we're going to then get a nice insulin response. So that's going to push the glucose into the muscle, push the amino acids into the muscle. And so we're going to be able to start making all those things that we need to make, and pushing those things into the thyroid. So now I can actually make what I need for the thyroid hormone. And because I knew we needed to have fat in there, I put the phosphatidylcholine. Now, what's so great about choline, it's really important as a methylator. If you have MTHFR, it's really good to make acetylcholine, which is an incredibly important neurotransmitter for sympathetic, parasympathetic neuromuscular junction. But also choline can be converted to betaine, and it then helps bile flow, and it also helps get rid of homocysteine. So just really important to have lecithin or phosphatidylcholine. It's also the #1 most important phospholipid in your cell membrane. So you're going to have way better skin, hair, and nails when you have lecithin. It's in nuts and egg yolks and chocolate. So there's plenty of it in there. In order for your mitochondria to actually work, which is the end product of the thyroid, is always making mitochondria, we need all our B vitamins. So I wrote them all out for you. And we need magnesium, because you need magnesium every time you make ATP, and you're supposed to make your weight in ATP every day. And that's why 80% of adult Americans are deficient. And we can see on this slide lots of sources of magnesium, because it's in the greens and it's in the nuts. It doesn't have any chocolate on the slide, but it is there. And then some people really not loving red meat, but you do need iron. And RDA for iron is 8 milligrams for non-menstruating people. But for menstruating women, they need 18 milligrams of iron. And that's why a lot of women, if they have a heavy cycle, they're so tired. And we need sulfur. And sulfur comes in cruciferous vegetables. So I really believe at least one of your cups of fruits and vegetables should be a cruciferous vegetable. So that would be really important, because the sulfur in the cruciferous vegetables is not only important for energy production, but also to make insulin. So you're going to have better blood sugar handling. It's also important for bone health. So you're just going to have better bones. You're going to have way better energy, and you're going to have way better blood sugar handling. And then we can see my 2 favorite antioxidants, the turmeric and the ginger, that has been shown together to have the most importance in keeping the fire under control, because mitochondria are combustion engines. So there's a lot of fire in there, and we want to have it under control by having antioxidants. But again, we want to make sure we have all the right vitamins and the right minerals to run the mitochondria, so that our thyroid gets the right feedback. And so that's why I put in 100% of the B vitamins. And I wanted to make sure that the minerals, because it has some iodine in there and some selenium, and then there is naturally iron in both the pea and the cocoa, but only 8 milligrams are in this. So you can see that right there. I think 7.5 or something. And for your patients, we have this lovely little brochure that you can download off of the website so that they really understand. It's not like all of these vitamins don't work all over the place, because we have it there about energy and focus. But I really wanted to pick on the ones where we're really talking about the thyroid for this. And here I did put in the iodine, the selenium. Now, manganese is interesting because it is the most important antioxidant in the mitochondria. So that's why I threw it in there. And you can't make cholesterol without niacin. And then the lecithin, really, really important, and as we saw with that whole hormonal control there. And so, again, the American Heart Association says that really they wanted 5 cups of fruits and 5 cups of vegetables. And then they were saying, well, we're going to strive for 5, but even 40% of the population doesn't even get the 5. So this is basically has the equivalent of 1 vegetable in the shake. That's why it's great to add some fruit to it. You can have, then you got 2. I'm a big fan of, one of the things we should have are beets. So I have beets, not maybe every single day, but most days a week. They're going to make bile flow really well. And so having some kind of protein that has fat in it, and having some beets, and then here's beet leaves as well. So it just all really works really great. And you're just going to feel a lot more energy the next day. And because you've gotten that bile to flow and convert T4 to T3. And you really have to have the vitamin C. So all fruits and vegetables have vitamin C as ascorbic acid. That's why it's great to have it fresh. You don't want to have ascorbic acid as a supplement that you open up. It really goes bad very easily in the jar. And so you really want it in a closed packet, or to eat it in something that you're going to peel and eat that day. So all fruits and vegetables, and celery, broccoli, sweet potatoes, gallop apples, 2 gala apples have the equivalent of the biological activity of 1,500 milligrams of ascorbic acid, just 2 gala apples. And the RDA of ascorbic acid is only 60, but I think people really probably need 500 to do everything, but the RDA is probably too low. But again, so important to have your fruits and vegetables. The literature on ginger and turmeric, so good. When you do antioxidants, we were able to get those antibodies in a year to go, no gluten, no dairy, and with the cinnamon and the turmeric, the antibodies went to 0 at the end of the year with patients that I had this on. So that was really great. And cinnamon, not only does it aid in blood sugar handling, it's also really, really great as anti-inflammatory. And together they all work really great to decrease the inflammation in the gut. Because again, you're eating those foods that you're having this reaction to. Keep the gut happy, everybody's happy. We're going to digest better. We're going to get all the nutrition we need, and we're going to be able to have our good metabolic function. And so I'm going to stop the share and then I'm going to stop the video and then ask for questions. So I'll just